Yep. Okay, thanks everybody. Okay, people in the back, do we want to sit down at some point? Yeah. Okay, no, this thing isn't that loud anyway, but you know. Okay, anyway, welcome everybody. Welcome to... Okay, okay, everybody, can I have your attention, please? Thank you very much. Anyway, so yes, hello, welcome to session 3 of Bible study. Wow, it's session 3 already. Hey, welcome to February. So I know it's been a bit. It's been a couple of weeks since the last session, which was in January. So after this little welcome, we'll just do a quick recap of where we were previously and what we did in the previous 1 or 2 sessions, depending on which ones you were here for, but I'll just go over them really quick. And I'll also go over some clarifications about some of the things that we had questions about and there was a little bit of discussion about, especially in session 2. So I will be going over that in a bit. Okay, hopefully the words are large enough, right? Okay, I've been generally taking font reference. Okay, so in our first 2 sessions, we essentially introduced ourselves. We introduced ourselves a little to the Sermon on the Mount, where it happens. So it happens on a mountain in Galilee, which is, it's not really stated where this is. And if you've actually been there, there's like a couple of them. So it's like, whichever one it was. And so but more importantly, we also covered what's the structure of blessings in Jewish wisdom literature, because I think that helps us better understand the various sentences that Jesus starts with in his introduction. So because we usually translate it nowadays as blessed are the people who X because they will Y. However, in Jewish wisdom literature, how this would be put, as in just to summarize really quickly, is they would start with, so the word blessed there is actually the word for happy. So it's actually, happy are those who X. So that part is actually, the first part is actually not the blessing. The second half is the blessing. Because happy are you who are something. So this is the state you're in, the first part. And then the second part is the blessing. So it's like, happy are you who wake up early, because you can see the sunrise. That's the blessing. Something like that. Like, happy are you who drink a lot of water because you get lots of toilet breaks or something like that. Yeah. So you get what I'm trying to say, right? The first part's not actually the blessing. Drinking water is not like this is not the blessing, but the blessing is get lots of toilet breaks. Yeah, so that's the second half. Okay, so yeah, that's the part that we went through. And and at some point we actually had some questions about and some clarification about Jesus's audience. So I think one of the things that we need to pay attention to in anything we read, really, and this also includes the Bible and the Gospels, is that when we talk about audiences, we're thinking about it in terms of when we think about stories and narratives, we are thinking about 2 layers minimum of audience. So for example, I'm here right now facilitating this Bible study, right? So if somebody 10 years later were to tell this story about this Bible study for some reason, or for whatever reason they would want to, but if they do, so there's 2 layers and they tell this story to a different group of people. Now there's 2 layers of audience, right? In the story itself, I'm the person saying stuff, and you are technically the audience. So that's 1 layer, right? But the second layer is this person's also telling the story to their own audience. And that's a different group of people, right? And the nature of that audience changes the way in which the story needs to be told. If you just think about it a bit. For example, even something as basic as you change from radio to TV, right? Yeah, I think everybody remembers that transition from mostly radio to TV. Suddenly there were pictures, suddenly there were images, and suddenly the way in which they tell the story changes. Because now you can see parts of the story, right? They don't have to say A frowned at X, Now they just need to show you on the screen the person close out with the person's frowning face. And you know, oh, A is frowning at B. You know that now. So the nature of the storytelling will change. So there's really like two layers of the audience here. So the first one is Jesus and his disciples and the people who, and of course there were probably some other people who were there, but you know, the biblical text mentions the disciples specifically. Fair enough. And of course, the second layer of audience that we should never forget is the person who wrote the book of Matthew and the audience for that text, which is the early Christians. And of course, like the early Christians had their circumstances, and that also defines why the book, that also has a big impact on why the book is written a certain way. Okay, yeah. So, let me just quickly look through this. Yeah, so that actually plays a big role in the way in which the book of Matthew writes of Jesus as having come first. So when we talk about the first three Beatitudes, in some ways, there are many ways of interpreting it, but there are the one we are going to go, the approach that we're going with, like I said in session 2, is that we are going with the first three Beatitudes representing who is Jesus coming to, who is Jesus recruiting, right? Like, who is Jesus starting his ministry with? And we identify that as the people who are poor, the people who are downtrodden, the people who are oppressed, and they have been disinherited. They are on the outside of things. And so if you think about it, how does this apply to both the Jews in the narrative? So in the narrative, Jesus would have been speaking to Jews, right? And specifically, they would have been people, Jews and others from Galilee. So specifically, they were outcasts. Galilee was considered to be, you know, it's like, it's like, oh, Galilee, that lame place, like that. That was the way they were. That was the way they were thought of at the time. And while his disciples were not necessarily all poor, even the ones who weren't poor were probably not very well liked. You know, nobody likes the tax man. Like the character of Levi, and some people would link Levi with Matthew, and like as in that they are the same person. Yeah, this person was probably not the most popular, right? You're collecting taxes, and you're not just like people who collect taxes for your government are already kind of like the tax guy. Imagine being the guy who collects taxes for the foreign government that oppresses your people. Maximum unpopular. Yeah, so that's the kind of person Jesus is coming to in the text. And this would have been relevant to the early Christians as well, because even though modern scholarship has shown that the periods of persecution that the church underwent throughout about like the 300-odd period between the transition from a non-Christian to a more Christian-aligned Roman Empire, that's about 300 years. The exact periods of persecution are stated to be around like 10% of that time. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine trying to tell somebody who is 30 years old that you were only bullied a little bit because you were bullied from primary 1 to primary 2. Don't worry, it was only 1/10 of your life. They only bullied you a bit only. Yeah, I don't think they would take that from you, right? Like, that's not, they would just be like, what the heck are you talking about? And they'd be right, because, well, the experience matters, right? And like, the experience is out, the experience of being bullied, the experience of being persecuted is important to how people define themselves. And of course, I use the example of primary 1 and primary 2 because your experiences in your formative years are important. And the formative years of the early church were spent not having a great time. Yeah, they were not having a good time, like in the early formative years. So this kind of text is important for them as well. Yeah, so I'm just clarifying something that I really wasn't very clear about in session 2, but we'll just cover it here. Okay, so now that we are done introducing the first 3 Beatitudes, which is about who Jesus is calling, who Jesus is going to, who's going to be on Team Jesus, like at the outset, okay? We are in the modern day, we are definitely not, we are not like the very, very poor, we are not the very, very hated or something like that, but this is the initial pitch for Team Jesus. So the next thing we're going to move on to is, what is a person in the kingdom? So he's saying, who is Jesus calling to be in the kingdom of the skies, right? And now we are going to talk about what is a person who is going to be part of this kingdom going to be like. So that's the next 3 Beatitudes. That's where we're going to start. Okay. Woohoo! Next slide. Okay. Right, so this is Beatitude number 4. Number 4. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. So let's just do a few notes first. So our usual impression of hunger and thirsting for righteousness is you seek to be righteous, right? So why do people hunger and thirst? Why do you hunger and thirst? Just think about it separately from this whole thing first. When do you get hungry? Okay, when do you get thirsty? Have you tried being hungry for a very long time? Do you think it will be fun? Yeah. Would going without water for say 2 days be very fun? Yeah, you probably be dead. A couple of days, actually couple of days without water, you will just, without any water at all, you will be pretty dead. Yeah. So it's important to understand this sentence, this beatitude, in the context of what is hunger and what is thirst. These are two, it's not, today I wake up a bit late, I hungry already. It's not that kind of hungry. This is just the normal kind of hungry. When you say hunger and thirst, these are states of want. These are states of lacking X, or there's no food, there's no water. These are not pleasant things to be at all. And so if you think about it, if you say when you're hungry means no food and hungry means no water, right? If you think about it, if you hunger and thirst for righteousness, what does that mean? See, but if you're desperate for righteousness, what does that mean about the presence of righteousness? That's actually not a wrong way of looking at it. So what they are trying to say is that if people have to be in a state to be hungry and thirsty for righteousness, means there's very little righteousness to be found. If not, you wouldn't be hungry, right? If there's sufficient food, you don't need to be hungry. If you have enough water, won't be thirsty. So it's only because there's no food and no water that you hunger and thirst. And so the idea that you hunger and thirst for righteousness means there's actually very little righteousness around to be found. And that's actually what Jesus is talking about here. He's talking about the state of, not only of ourselves, but also the fact that, so Jesus is, we talked about in session 2, Jesus is focused not only on the personal things, but he's also focused on how you view everything around you. So in the sense, when he says hunger and thirst for righteousness, this refers to people who acknowledge and know that there's actually very little righteousness to be found anywhere, including yourself. Well, including yourself, but also everywhere else. There just isn't a lot of it to go around. So this, I will just, also there's a note on, we actually did cover this in our previous series on Proverbs, but I'll just go through how righteousness is defined here. So the righteousness, at least in Greek, is the word dikaiosune or dike. So this specifically, the Greeks actually had various words for these things, depending on what aspect of it you're thinking about. They have said, they had several different words for love. They had a couple different words for charity, and a couple words for justice as well. Yeah. So like, for example, Dike is one of the representations of justice. The other one is Astreus or Astrea. So that's a different thing altogether. Rather, no, they are related, but they're not quite the same. So in this case, Dikeasune refers to having like, it's a common justice and rightness that essentially is common to all people. So similarly, the relational aspect of justice is important here. Justice and righteousness are a matter of relating to people, as opposed to law. So law is more associated with something like Astreus, or later in the Roman times, it would be Justitia, which is actually where we get the word justice. From the Roman concept of Justitia, that's where we get justice, as like a kind of like a more aligned with law. So similarly, righteousness in Hebrew is zedekah or sedek, which actually is also a more relational term. It refers to, simply put, doing right by people. Do the right thing to people. And do the right because doing the right thing to people reflects your ability to be righteous before God. Okay? Do the right thing to people reflects your righteousness before God. That's how they would have viewed this word. Okay, so over here, so when we think about people who hunger and thirst for righteousness, people who knew that there was little righteousness and spoke about the lack of righteousness like around them, we are thinking about, like, so in the Jewish mind at least, people like this, they are thought of, this is like the legacy of the prophets. So that's what the prophets do, right? If you think about most of the stories in the Bible, that's what the prophets do all the time. Like, for example, the people of Israel are turning away from Yahweh and they are worshipping Baal. Who shows up? Okay, yes, Elijah shows up, right? And he goes, your God versus my God, 1v1 on Mount Carmel. Come, 1v1 me. That's Elijah, right? And then let's see, let's go like Israel has been destroyed and Judah is unrighteous. This is a very sad state of affairs. Who shows up? Yes, Jeremiah, thank you very much. Okay, okay, sure. But okay, yeah, Jeremiah shows up and Jeremiah goes, this is terrible, right? Like we need to go back. And how Jeremiah, how people like Jeremiah, how people like Hosea, how they define justice and righteousness. What's the sign of justice and righteousness? So according to people like Jeremiah, it's do justice and pursue righteousness. Be kind to the widow, to the orphan, and to the alien. That's how they define it. And like, for example, in Malachi as well, Malachi is the book just before Matthew, at least in the way we organize the Bible. And actually, even in the Hebrew Bible, Malachi was the last prophet, even though that's not the book at the end. So Malachi is like, God does not want sacrifices. God wants deeds. Do justice to others. That's like the prophets. Oh, the prophets always show up and go, there is no righteousness. Do right by other people and come back. That's how you show that you want to come back. It's not, I'm sorry, God, I never do X or Y or Z. And then you go, these people, oppress them. Not like that. Malachi is like, not like that. God wants you to actually stop oppressing those people and do right by them. And then God will accept your sacrifices. If not, your sacrifices are trash. Like Amos also comes there and says, your sacrifices mean nothing. In fact, your sacrifices displease God. Yeah, so that's what the prophets are all about. So this is what they are here. So Jesus is, when he says, happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. So satisfied in this case means your hunger and thirst will be filled. Your desire will be granted, right? Your desire will be granted. Jesus is saying God will help you become righteous. Even though hunger and thirst for righteousness involves acknowledging that you yourself are not necessarily righteous. And of course, that's true, right? Like even of the people who found the nation of Israel, the people whom the people of Israel claim descent from, there's a bit of a mixed record here and there, right? It's not the greatest, right? Like I know, yeah, Abraham has Isaac and everything, but you know that there's that whole incident before with Ishmael and his mother. And what's Abraham's solution to that? Abraham's solution to that is, man, my wife is so annoying. How about I just send Hagar and Ishmael into the desert? That's going to solve all our problems. Like, really? Okay, great. It's just like, let's just send the masterless slave, the masterless slave, the woman without rights, and her boy into the desert with some food and everything. I'm sure it will all work out. Great job, Abraham. I mean, this is not one of his most glorious moments, And that whole situation was his fault and Sarah's fault to begin with, right? Like they were the ones who decided that they couldn't wait for a child and they did the whole thing. And then that was their solution, right? Basically, let's just, if they live, they live. If they die, they die. Not the best, right? Even people who the Israelites would have looked up to, even people whom we regard as like, great people of the faith, there are times when it doesn't work out. So there is a call to humility as well here, the hunger and thirst for righteousness. There's a call to know that, basically cultivate that righteousness in ourselves and understand that it's not something that's going to be easy. It's challenging in that way. So Jesus wants people to be like the prophets, to be angry about the lack of righteousness, but to also be humble and know that that is something that you can't achieve simply by yourself. Yeah. So we can kind of read it as such. So this is kind of like how I would interpret this. So it's, happy are those who desire that doing right by others, being in right relationship with God and with other people, in a world where that's just not the case all the time, right? In many ways in the world, like we are defined by sometimes, it's easy to get caught up in having authority over other people. Like, this is the way in which we relate to one another. So and so is your boss, so and so is your whatever, right? Jesus is saying that that's not how we want to relate to one another. Yep. Yeah, so that's why that's also linked to why Jesus comes to people who are on the margins. Like people who are on the margins, people who are not the highest in society, I think they can see quite clearly how the various systems of rightness and power in the world are just, they can more easily see how they don't work. Like, somebody who is like super elite is not going to see this the same. It's not going to quite see this power system, like the way in which people relate to one another on systems of power. They're not going to see it the same way. Because 你高高在上嘛, it's just like, hey, everything's okay, right? I'm living great. It's just like, but the people who have fallen through the cracks, the people who are not exactly success stories, they can see how it doesn't work. And you're like, well, it didn't work. Well, it definitely didn't work for me. What are you talking about? Yeah. So, and so part of this, and remember when I talked about justice, right? Do right by the widow, do right by the orphan, do right by the alien, do right by the excluded people. Jesus is also telling people to strive. He will also talk about this further on, but here he's also putting forward this thing where he's talking about relating to others as fellow images of God. The reason why justice, the reason why righteousness is done, and the reason why we do right by other people is because they are also images of God, just like you. And in that, we are equal, regardless of your position in, society as a whole. Okay, here we go. Yeah, number 5. Woo! Okay, number 5 is, the 5th beatitude is, happy are those who show mercy. And what's the blessing? Because they will be shown mercy. So, some quick translation notes again here. So the Greek here for mercy is actually eleos, which is pity, compassion. And it's like you are giving love and concern and care to people you don't have to. It's not something that's bound by obligation. Like, for example, there are other forms of like compassion and love and concern, like, for example, storge. But storge is a parental sort of thing. There is a social obligation there. This, it's like 就是你妈妈，就是你老爸, so they care about you, right? There's a different sort of dynamic there. So eleos is the concept of this person's not related to you at all. Like, they're not in your social circle or whatever, but you reach out to them and show them this compassion and love anyway. So that's where that one comes from. So the reason why it's not agape is because agape refers to divinity. The agape has an element of divinity to it, while eleos is 人与人之间的, it's a person to person sort of thing. So agape has a more, I guess, it has a more distant and more noble idea to it, at least in the Greek mind anyway. So interestingly, mercy here for Hebrew is actually chesed. So chesed is steadfast love. You know the song, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. Yeah, correct. His mercies never come to an end. So that thing over there, when they say steadfast love and mercy, those are actually the same word. It's actually both chesed. So the chesed of the Lord never ceases. And actually, when they say his mercies never come to an end, it's actually also his chesed never comes to an end. So they're reflecting two different aspects of this word. They are basically going through two different aspects of this word here. And so, like, give thanks to the Lord our God and King, his love here, right? But it's actually, in Hebrew, it's actually his chesed endures forever. Yeah, correct. So this refers to a kind of like, it doesn't translate well in English, sorry. It translates as a phrase, but sorry, that's how it is. So it goes like, so it's a steadfast kind of love. It's also something you go out of your way. Like, the understanding is you didn't have to do this, but you did it anyway. Okay, that's what we're talking about. So, yes. So yeah, sorry. It was actually there as well. Like, when they talk about the Lord saving them from Egypt, right? There's this whole song where they talk about how the Lord saved them from Egypt. It says his mercy endures forever. It's actually also the same word. So this is what they're talking about, chesed. So actually today, remember when Pastor Ong was preaching, he has this story about the blind man, right? And he says, Son of David, have mercy upon me, right? Actually, what he says is, have chesed upon me. Show me love, even though I'm not part of your circle of disciples. I'm not part of you don't know me at all. But please show me love, right? So that's what that story is about. That's what Jesus does. This is the kind of mercy, this is the kind of love, that this aspect of God that Jesus represents a lot in his various ministries in the Gospels. All of the Gospel writers pay quite a lot of attention to this particular aspect of Jesus. Mark talks about it, Matthew has it. In fact, the story of the blind man or the blind men. For example, in Mark, the blind man is specifically pointed out as being called Bartimaeus, and they meet him outside Jericho somewhere. In Matthew, actually, the same story happens. It's just that it's two dudes instead of one. So they all pay attention to this idea of Jesus models God's this chesed love, this love that was not necessary, but that was given anyway. Yeah, so that's really important to Jesus' story. And in some ways you can say that this appears here at the very first part of Matthew before Jesus has even started his ministry, because this is what we call narrative foreshadowing. So it's like introduction to what is Jesus like, and then later when you go to the rest of Matthew and you look through it and Jesus heals this person, Jesus Jesus heals the centurion's servant, Jesus heals the synagogue leader's daughter. Then you basically people at that time would have gone back to this introduction and gone like, yeah, so that's what they were talking about. This is examples of what Jesus is talking about. Yeah. Hooray. Yeah. And so, like, do you remember Beatitude number 3? Yeah. Blessed are the meek, for they will be the children of God. And that is also a form of chesed love. Because remember, we were not children originally, but you are now called to be children of God. So you can think of chesed as almost being like bringing somebody into your family who wasn't before. So that concept of adoption, like that concept of adoption that the later New Testament writers will reflect about, is also a very important theme that is basically they just signpost it right here. And well, you can start to see why, even though Mark was technically written first, why Matthew is the first gospel in the Bible. Because there is a very structured layout of what a follower of Jesus is meant to be like. Nope. Yeah. Yes. I mean, that's why the passage goes, and to all who receive him and believe in his name, he gave the right to be the children of God. So they are saying that this category is now a separate category from being a Jew. Or rather, it's no longer required. Whether they thought it was a birth or not is a subject of debate. I'm not going to wade into this debate. This seems I haven't done enough research on it anyway, so it's going to be very contentious, and I'm going to be pulling a lot of stuff out of my... So, no. Yep. Yes. So, yeah. Okay, this is fair enough. So what I need to say is that, so this goes back to what we were saying earlier, that there are two layers of audience, right? In the narrative itself, Jesus is speaking to his audience who are predominantly Jewish. This is not in contest. However, the second layer of the audience is the author of the book of Matthew is speaking to the early Christians at large, who would actually have become majority Gentiles by this point, or they were well on their way to that. Yeah, so we don't actually have very hard numbers on how many Christians there were exactly and what the proportion was. But by the time the book of Matthew is done being written, it's largely agreed that it's been about a couple of decades since the gospel left Jerusalem. So it's had quite a bit of time to grow since then. So it's quite likely that the numbers are at the very least equal. And if we extrapolate the rate at which Christianity gains like authority, actually part of the reason why persecution of Christianity in the Roman Empire declines over time is actually because Christian influence over the Roman Empire increases over time. To the point where like by 300 AD, when the Romans are at war with one another about who's going to be emperor next, one of the candidates who might become emperor, he has not become emperor yet, but he might, his female relatives are basically all Christian. And they actually have quite a big influence like on his life. It's your mom, it's your mom, it's your aunt, it's your... but they have an influence on your life whether you want it or whether you like it or not. Yeah. The person I'm talking about is actually Constantine. His mother is Christian. So, yeah. And, well, so by this point, Christianity's penetration is so great that basically even when people try to do persecutions, Christians have a lot of friends in high places to kind of like make that like, they're like, do we really have to do that? Or they go like, you know what, if I wait, Rome's been pretty unstable these last couple of years. If I literally wait 2 years, this guy's probably gonna be dead. That actually does happen. I'm just gonna wait a couple of years, this guy's gonna be dead by then. Yeah, so things change a lot. So if we take that process of extrapolation where Christianity actually never stops becoming more influential in the empire, I think it's pretty soon, like the time between Jews outnumbering Gentiles to Gentiles outnumbering Jews as Christians, it's probably not a long time at all. Yeah. Sorry, hard numbers are not available to us. This is what happens when the movement spends quite a bit of time underground. You just don't have very good numbers. You just have trends. Oh well. Yeah. So the fourth beatitude is a person who follows Jesus is somebody who hungers and thirsts for righteousness, somebody who wants righteousness in themselves and in the world, and is willing to speak up when it's not there. So number 5 is a person who follows Christ, a person who is a member of the kingdom of the skies, is somebody who shows chesed love, who shows love to people when they don't have to. And in turn, they will also be rewarded by God's abundant love. Because so as the Jews believed it, God is the source of all blessing and God is the source of all love and mercy. So you show mercy and you receive mercy. This is beatitude number 5. Verse 7, I think. Yeah. 7. Yeah. So that kind of like abundant, generous love that you give, you will also receive from God. That's beatitude number 5. So this is honestly Jesus is coming forward as like this is a renewing of that covenant between Israel and God that was at his time, in his time, many people thought it to have been broken in some ways. It's been a long, like I talked about in session 2, it's been like 700 years since the Jews were last really free. This is a long time this is a very long time to spend like under foreign occupation, under various forms of foreign oppression. It's a long time. Yeah. So Jesus is saying that the family of God is not yet dead. It's been a long time, but we're back, baby. We're back. Like that's basically what it is. So that the founding of Israel is God's merciful act of adopting people. Because remember, God says, not by any merit of yours were you chosen, but I will show my glory through you. Right? It's an act of adoption. God is like, I didn't have to do that, but I'm going to do it. So let's have a covenant. Right? So Jesus is saying that God is bringing this back. And if you follow me, I'm going to show you how we're going to bring it back. Right? And he's saying that because this great mercy has been shown to us through me, we should also show mercy to other people. That's what Jesus is saying. And of course, like this, he will elaborate on this even further when he talks about law, and we will possibly cover it if we have enough time. We will possibly cover it. And that is where the famous phrase, go the extra mile, comes from. Like this idea of like doing more than you have to. If a man asks you to go with him 1 mile, go with him 2. Yeah. That's what this kind of love means. This is extra mile love. 你叫我拿一个塑胶袋啊，我帮你全都拿了吧 you know? Okay. Right, so the 6th, I actually didn't change that over, did I? Dear me. Okay, beatitude number 6 is the pure of heart. Now, what does that even mean? Okay, never mind. So this, like the 3rd beatitude, this is actually also a reference to a psalm. So this particular psalm is Psalm 24. So where does the pure in heart come from? You know the song, Give Us Clean Hands, right? So Psalm 24 reads this way: Who may ascend to the mountain of the Lord, and who may stand in his holy place? The one who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not trust in an idol or swear by a false god. They will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from God their Savior. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek your face, God of Jacob. So Jesus is referencing when Jesus says pure of heart. So at that time, people would have recognized this particular wording as like being related to things like this. This is the idea we're talking about. So what does it mean to see God? So Does anyone remember like various incidents in which people saw God? What did they say? Yeah, and they didn't even see God, right? No, nobody actually sees God in the Bible. Like, for example, when Moses says, "Let me see your face," and God says, "I can show you a corner of my glory as I pass, but if you see my face, you will die." And so when Moses talks to God, like, do you remember when Moses like sees a piece of God's glory on the mountain? Yeah, like the narrative states that he has to veil his face so the light that reflected off his face from God doesn't blind everybody else. And when people actually saw Moses, like Moses was only shining with a piece of like what he had seen. So God literally showed him a corner of his glory, and a piece of that remained on Moses' face. And he came down the mountain and people were just like, we're dead, we're gonna die, help me. And they were just, and Moses was like, relax. Okay, somebody get me a veil, okay? Aaron, pass me the, okay, got it. And he puts it on and he goes like, all right, better? And everybody's just like, whew. Yeah, so that's the Jewish worldview, right? That God's glory is so high that to see it is to die. That's like their opinion. That's how they saw this. So the reason why it is such a thing to see God. But if you remember, like in the very beginning, in the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve walked in the garden and they spoke to God just fine. Like there was none of this like trepidation in having to see God. And that's because in the Eden relationship, everybody was together in the garden and everything was not perfect, but good. Like we were doing fine. But right now, people are all living outside of Eden. And it's been a long time since anybody has even seen Eden. Eden has become a legend. It's like, where the heck is that? Now, it's like stories have become legend has become myth, and nobody knows where that is anymore. So, like in a physical sense anyway. And in a spiritual sense, to be able to see God means to come back to that Eden relationship, right? So if you think about it, like for example, Moses, I already referenced it. I already just referenced it. The Exodus part is Moses, and we talk about Isaiah, right? When Isaiah actually doesn't see God. Isaiah sees a vision of the glory of God, and he says, "I am a man of unclean lips. Now I shall surely die." And then the angel takes the coal and puts it to his lips and goes, "Now your lips are clean. Now go and tell people about God's glory." So what Jesus is saying is that the people who are pure in heart will come back to this Eden relationship. You will become clean again. And that we can actually have something like this. We can actually have something like this on earth. It can be done. You can, follow me, I'll show you how. So, and of course, like if you read in Revelation, right? Revelation 22 is to see God, you come back to Eden. There's basically in Revelation, at least in John's vision, there's a new heaven and a new earth. And the city is open, and there is a garden, and there's a river flowing through it. Basically, the world has become renewed. Sorry, I always think of a Latin phrase when that happens. Never mind. Yeah, the Latins have a phrase called mundi renovatio, which is the world becomes renewed. So that was how they saw this aspect of like Eden comes back. It's not the world is destroyed or whatever, but it's mundi renovatio, which is the world is renewed. Renovatio is where you get renovate. Yeah, so we pull a lot of our language from like other older languages. That's where we get renovation from. So to renovate your house, renovatio is to renew your house, give your house a new lease on life. Yeah, so to re-enter Eden is to get a new lease on life, right? And actually this goes back to when Jesus talks about new life and new creation, right? It's not everything is destroyed and recreated. How they thought about it was the thing that is already here is renewed. So Jesus was saying that if you follow me, you can get something like it that points towards it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so if you think about the first three beatitudes as Jesus saying, you guys are the people that I'm going to call, come to me. And then, so the second set of beatitudes is Jesus going, this is what I would like you to be like. And if you follow me, I'll show you how you can be like that. Yeah. So that's how you can think of the second set of beatitudes. The second set of three, rather. Okay. So the ultimately purity of heart. So when we talk about pure in heart, what does that actually mean? So when they so remember the first two beatitudes were about deeds, right? Like a posture, like you need to hunger and thirst for righteousness. You need to speak up against a lack of righteousness, right? And also you want your deeds in your deeds you want to show mercy, show people love. Jesus is saying that this all comes out of a purity of heart. Like, how do you keep your... there's, Psalm 119 verse 9, right? How can... I think that's the one. Yeah. So it's how can a young man keep his way pure? By keeping it according to your word. That's why the next section after that is Jesus is going to talk about law, how to keep according to the word. But here is what we're talking about. But this is how a person keeps their way pure. So this purity of heart thing is it's also very much a mental posture. So one thing about purity is that sometimes when you do enough good deeds, when you talk enough of a big game, it's actually not very difficult to convince yourself that that's also like you've made it. Like, you've done all the good. You're amazing. It's like you've done everything you can. You're awesome. But what Jesus is trying to say is that always remember to inspect your heart. Always remember to understand that our motivations are not necessarily all pure, right? They won't be. But being able to acknowledge that is very important to becoming pure in heart. That's why David says, create in me a clean heart, right? He actually writes, this is the psalm that he writes where he is really sad that he, yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's not one of his most glorious moments, but while in the Genesis, see, one of the differences between David and a lot of the other fathers of the Jews, as so to speak, is that while actually a lot of them are not shown to necessarily repent from the wrong things that they've done. In fact, Abraham makes the same mistake twice. It's like, hello. What David does is he repents. He doesn't do the same thing again. He can make another mistake at some point, but he always comes back. And that's the kind of attitude that Jesus is referring to here when he talks about purity of heart. Does it still cause a lot of trouble for David later on? Yes, because there are consequences to mucking up relationships like that. There are long-term consequences to mucking things up like this. But the idea is always come back. Yeah, consequence is still there. And Jesus is saying, but come back. Yeah, so that's what purity of heart is about. Which is honestly really tough. It's actually quite scary. The degree to which you need to have that humility, actually is quite scary when I think about it. Yeah. Yeah. So to be pure of heart is to stay true and honest, not only to the deeds that you do, but also be true and honest about what your motives are, where you come from with this, and constantly to be able to bring it before God and to be open to admitting it, that, that it's not that you don't have the worst intentions, but your intentions are not always the best either. Yeah, it's not saying that you're bad, no, but it's your intentions are not the worst, but they also aren't the best, right? Sometimes we do the worst things when we are convinced that we are doing the right thing. When we are convinced that we are right, we can do a lot of things, right? When we are convinced that we are on the right side, we are just yes, 这是对的，这绝对就是对的. And you just do whatever you want, and it's just oh shit. that did not turn out well. Like it can turn out, sometimes it turns out great. Sometimes though, sometimes you go a little too far and then it goes bad pretty fast. I think we've all had this experience, right? Of like, it starts good, it starts from good intentions, and then it goes bad. It goes bad at some point. Yeah, we all know that feeling. And Jesus is saying that it's not necessarily bad to feel this way, but know that this is part of the process. And being able to come clean about it is a big part of how you can re-enter that Eden relationship. Like if you read the book of Genesis and the story of how they were exiled from Eden, what's the triggering factor behind how severe the problem was that they couldn't admit to God that they had done something at all, right? Yeah, it's not that the snake wasn't at fault, but the snake wasn't solely at fault, right? Like everybody shared the blame in that particular story. But they were just like, that guy. And then it's like, Adam was like, it's her. And then she was like, it's the snake. And the snake was just like, I just told you the thing, man. Like if the snake had a line there, the snake would be like, no, I just told you, I just told you the thing. You did the thing. Yeah, so that was a big part of why that was severe. It's not just you did the thing, but it's you did the thing, and then not only did you not admit it, but you said it was someone else's fault that this happened at all. And God was, and that's, Yeah, if the snake had a line there, the snake would have probably said something like that, like, you're the one who listened to me, it's not my fault. Yeah, it's like, the snake was just like, I was just asking some questions, just asking some honest questions. Yeah. So Jesus is saying that this honesty and this ability to come back, even after you've done something wrong, is the foundation of an Eden relationship. And it's honestly the foundation, like you can't have an Eden relationship with God. If you look at the rest of the passage, he talks about righteousness, he talks about mercy, right? You can't have that Eden relationship with God if you don't first seek that Eden relationship with other people, right? Correct. Yeah, and honestly, that ruins your relationships with other people as well. So that's exactly right. So this is what Jesus is talking about. This whole like right relations thing is defined by love and mercy, and it is also defined by being able to admit it when something's gone wrong. Like when something is your responsibility, when you have not felt the best way towards other people, you have to be able to admit that that's the case. Yeah. So the conclusion over there is that we are called to lay these mixed intentions at God's feet and ask that God's steadfast love, God's chesed, can be renewed for us every day. And so we can show that to other people as well. So that's what Jesus is saying is the character of somebody who wants to join the kingdom. So, just a quick preview of the next three things. So we are basically done here. So I'll just summarize again. So Jesus' character of somebody who follows Christ, like somebody who wants to be part of this kingdom that he's declaring, is these people are defined by their desire for righteousness and their acknowledgement that righteousness doesn't exist in themselves or in other people. And we are equal in this way, and so we show love to one another, even as God has shown us love. And when we do things that break up this relationship between us and between God, we should know how to search ourselves and find that mixed, that sort of like mixed emotion, that mixed intention within us, and admit it to other people and tell them, we're sorry, please forgive me. Like, can we be in this loving relationship again? Yeah, that's what Jesus is asking from his followers. So the next three Beatitudes can, or at least I'm categorizing it as the challenges that face people who are part of the kingdom. So if you're part of the kingdom, there are going to be like, well, not as though, this is not like saying these 3 beatitudes were not challenging enough to follow, okay? Like these are already quite challenging, and Jesus says, don't worry, but wait, there's more challenges. So the next 3 beatitudes are the challenges that face like them as a whole. So he's going to be talking about things like persecution and things like that. So that's where we're going next session, next week. Yes, so yes, we are done for now. Thank you all for being here. Yeah. Yes, we are going to have a short quiz. Yes, and we're going to have a short quiz now. So yes, roll the quiz. I reckon you guys are going to have to sit closer because, like I said, I'm not a premium member, so I can't access some of the features, so the words remain a little small. Sorry. Maybe if I do enough Kahoots all the time, I might just become a member. We'll see. Okay, is everybody in? Is anybody still logging in? Okay, anybody else? Okay, in that case, let's go. Yep. Technically, this is an open book test, so you can actually just check your Bible if you really have to. It's not a closed book test, okay? Okay, so yes, it is in fact number 3, which is blessed are the meek, for they will be called children of God. That's number 3. Okay, next. 好快，好快。Sorry. Okay, almost everyone got this right. So yes, actually number 4 is not even from the Sermon on the Mount. The rest of them actually are. We will, depending on whether we have time or not, we might go through A and C in our series, but this is still in the future. Okay, next. Jolene maintains her lead. Yeah, next. Yeah, so this was one of the main points of this. This is one of the main points of this session, which is to see God, is to actually come back to this relationship with God and come back to this relationship with people that is defined by a common desire for righteousness and love for one another. Okay, next. This music is actually quite tense. Like, Yeah, so, okay. Actually, Auntie Esther raised an interesting point earlier, which is that they are not wholly unrelated. And I did say so, that they're not actually unrelated to one another. It's just that Greek they try to be more precise with the exact aspect of what they are talking about. Like, for example, the Greeks actually had, so they had 6 different words for charity and 5 different words for beauty, at least. That I remember. So they try to be precise with these things, and the inflection that's being used here is eleos, which is to have mercy. Yeah. That's not bad. It's not a bad name either. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Next. Chris. Okay. We've got a bit of a change up. What's going on? Okay. Okay, let's go. Okay, so yes, one of the things that so interestingly, John the Evangelist. So John, if we assume that John the Evangelist is the same person as the one who writes John of Revelation, even assuming so, John actually never actually sees the one who sits on the throne. John actually sees and speaks to an angel, one who looks like the Son of Man, and the various elders who sit around the throne. But the person on the throne is actually never described. It's just a voice that he can kind of hear. Yeah, next. All right, it's getting kind of close over there. It's kind of close. Yeah, so as reiterated before, it is mercy and justice. So there can be no righteousness. Remember righteousness in the prophets is do righteousness and justice. Give justice to people, and that's how you will be righteous. And then after that, with righteousness and justice must come from a heart of that mercy, that love that we were talking about. So that's what Beatitude 4 and 5, that's the argument that they make up. Okay, next. Wow, okay. All right. Yep, thank you. So, whose example are you following when you hunger and thirst for righteousness? So, yeah, emulate is like follow, like be like. Okay, so specifically, when Jesus is talking about hunger and thirsting for righteousness, especially in the aspect of like how it is related to society, it is actually in the Bible, it is mainly the prophets who serve that role of arguing. Like the psalmists talk about righteousness, but the prophets argue for righteousness. Especially they argue for righteousness against the kings and sometimes against the scribes as well. Yeah, so the prophets are actually they really tough it out. They have a tough time. Okay, next. Okay. Wow, somebody is. It's like 1, 2, 3. Consistent. 1, 2, 3 stand. Okay, this is consistency, I guess. I don't know who that is, but whatever. Next, let's go. Last question. Ding ding dong. Yep. So yes, that is absolutely true. If we can't be honest, like as far as Jesus is concerned, if we can't be honest to one another about our motives, if we can't be honest to one another about how we are often very imperfect, actually it's very difficult for us to establish that equality which is necessary for justice and love. Okay. Yeah, all right. Let's see who's our podium. Okay. Okay, congratulations, everybody. By the way, next time I need to get new snacks because I'm out of these already. Next time I need to get new ones. Okay, I'll go get her. Whatever, it's fine. Don't worry. Okay, so we'll see you all next week for session 4. Like, thanks for being here. And if y'all have any questions, y'all can definitely message me. And maybe we'll add it to our clarifications next time when we show up. Yeah. Okay. All right, thanks, Siok. Can we? Yeah. Okay, can we? Okay, hang on. Let's woo-doo. Okay, let's close in prayer first. Invite Pastor to pray for us, just to close. Thank you.
Let's turn to the Lord in prayer. Dear Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for the fun that we have, and your truth is forever, everlasting with us. In Jesus' name we give thanks. Amen.
All right, thank you, everybody. See y'all next week.